Okay, so the game class is our top level class. It is the class that extends JFrame. So why do we extend JFrame? Whenever we want to open up a window, a frame in Java that we can draw stuff in, we're going to have some class that extends JFrame. Now it implements two interfaces. It implements Action Listener and it implements the Item Listener interfaces. Those interfaces require that we implement some methods. Now the reason we implement these interfaces is because when we run the game, we're going to be listening to events for the buttons, for selecting the number of players, and or the checkboxes, and we're also going to be listening to events for the button for when the dice are rolled. And in order to listen to events, to widgets that are on our screen, we have to implement the appropriate interfaces for those widgets. One of those is for the roll button, the other one is for the checkboxes. So whenever we extend JFrame, Eclipse is going to give us a warning unless we add this line, and it'll auto-generate this line for us. And you can see if I delete that line, I get a warning here. If I hover my mouse over it, add default serial version ID, and it'll put that line back in. And I just delete the comment. So the default serial version ID is just to get rid of the warning. I have declared a public static final int width 900, so that will be the width of the JFrame. And I'm just storing that in a public way so that if anybody wants to know the width of the game, they can just type in, if anywhere else in my code I need the width of the game, I just type in game.width in all caps, and I'll get that value of 900. And the height is similar. Public meaning I can access it outside the class. Static meaning I do not need an instance of it. Final meaning it'll not change in my code as the program is running. Int because it's a whole number, okay, width. Public static game G, I'll explain that later. We'll come back to this. But the game class is going to have an instance of a game object, and it's going to, that instance of the game is going to be public. We're only going to create one window, one frame, and so I'm going to make that one frame that we create accessible outside of the class. Now, we're going to have multiple players, so I decided to put those in an array. We have a player class, and so I declare a variable for the instance of the game. I call it all players, and it is an array of those players. And so player is a class that I have defined. You can see it right there, and we'll go over the player class in more detail later. And in order to play Yahtzee, we need dice. We need 5 dice, and to be precise. And so I create a variable myDice that is able to hold an array of dice, and we have a dice class. Now, the scorecard and instructions are displayed in the background. So I've created a class that I call background image that just makes it convenient to load and display that image. And I'm going to store an instance of the background image class in the variable myBackground. We're going to need a button so that we can roll the dice. So I create a private button, roll button. We're going to need to keep track of how many times the dice have been rolled, so we've got a private int roll count. We need to keep track of whose turn it is, and so the players are all stored in this array of players, and we need to know which of those players has the current turn. So I've created a variable called whose turn, that's an int, which will be an index into the array of all players. When the game is over, we're going to display a piece of text on the screen that says game over, and so we need some sort of a flag. I'm going to call it a flag. The flag is raised or lowered. It's raised to signify that something is happening, and by raising it I mean set it to true, right? A Boolean variable can hold values that are either true or false. So I've created a variable called game over. We'll set it to true when the game is over. And we're going to need some checkboxes so that they can select the number of players. And so I've created an array of checkboxes. Now buttons and checkboxes are things that we have imported, okay? But players and dice are the things that we have defined in separate files. And background image was also defined in a separate file. We've got an int, number of players. So when we set the number of players, we'll set that variable depending on which checkbox they click. Inside of main, and so this main method should look a lot like the other main methods of all the other JFrame or graphics applications we've written. We create an instance of the game, so G equals new game. You'll notice that I'm using the G variable that is the public static game G variable. So we create an instance of the game by calling the constructor. We're using the keyword new. We set its size, and we use the width and height that we've defined up above. We set resizable to false because I don't want them to resize this thing. I have been somewhat lazy in my applications. I don't make them resizable, and that allows me to do certain things like hard code XY values for the locations on the screen that things should be at. In a really nice, well-designed application, I wouldn't do that, but we're just learning to code. This is an intro class. So I'm just taking a shortcut here by setting resizable to false and setting the width and height to some fixed values, and then hard coding all the locations of things. G.set default close operation, JFrame exit on close, and so this is just allowing us to click the close button in the window. Set visible to true, this is what makes the window visible. Okay, and so that's the whole main method. Now you'll notice that in the main method, the first thing that happens is we call the constructor. So here I have a constructor, and the constructor gets a little bit complicated. I will move on and describe the constructor in the next video.